pathology behind multiple sclerosis and some of the clinical features. Many of you will already be knowing some of these things. Multiple sclerosis is basically characterized by an inflammatory demyelination of the central nervous system. The central nervous system comprises the brain and the spinal cord. Usually the peripheral nervous system is not involved in MS. And it's primarily an immune-mediated disease. And the exact cause of MS is still not known. So this is a schematic representation of what exactly happens in MS. It's just a very simple representation. Basically, you have these. So this is the normal neuron, where you have the cell body and you have the axon. Cell body is the place that receives all the impulses, and the axon is the part of the nerve that transmits the impulses on to the next nerve. Now the axon, as you can see, is covered by this structure called myelin, and this is the structure that's involved in MS. Myelin is basically a fat-containing structure, and the essential purpose of myelin is to provide insulation. It's basically like a copper electrical wire which is covered with plastic or rubber for insulation. The role of the myelin is that it increases the speed of conduction of electrical impulses across the nerve manyfold, almost by about 10 times it increases. It's because the electrical impulses jump from one node to the next. These areas in between these myelin particles are called the nodes of Ranvier. And the electrical impulses jump from one to the other, and as a result, the whole process gets sped up. In MS, this myelin gets damaged. As a result, the speed of the impulses gets slowed down significantly, and as a result, what should be reaching you maybe 2 milliseconds in 2 milliseconds time will reach you in about 8 milliseconds time, and as a result, the impulses get either obtunded or they get distorted, and as a result, you get the symptoms of MS. It's the same one, slightly more detailed. Basically, what's happening, what has been depicted here is the inflammatory process, and the inflammation comes from cells from the blood vessels that are adjacent to the nerves. There are 4 different patterns of demyelination that are described, and I won't go into the details of that. But in MS, the type of demyelination that occurs most commonly is the one that's adjacent to the blood vessels. This implies that the inflammation is coming directly from the blood that is carrying the inflammatory cells. And in MS, the helper T cells are the ones that have been primarily implicated in the inflammation. So again, as a result of inflammation, it's a process that takes time to build up, and over a period of time, the myelin gets damaged, and subsequently there is the development of the clinical symptoms. So who is likely to get MS? It's more common in temperate climates. It's more common in women. There is a slight preponderance in women. Women are about twice as likely as men to get MS. The age group is generally between 20 to 50 years. It's so far been more commonly recorded in Caucasians, and it's relatively uncommon in Asians, although the scenario is changing. And additional factors that have been implicated more recently include low vitamin D. This is something that's a field of active research among neurologists and neuroscientists these days. Genetic factors have been found to play a role in MS. A large proportion of MS patients have at least one first degree or second degree relative with multiple sclerosis. Viral infections, in particular a virus called Epstein-Barr virus, is known to cause cross-immune reactivity and can cause myelin damage, and this has been implicated in MS. So the point of this slide is that there is no single cause of MS that has been isolated, and nobody has been able to pinpoint one particular thing that is causing MS. It's basically a variety of reasons and variety of factors that are contributing to the illness coming forward. If you look at the world prevalence of MS, unfortunately still, this is from around 2009 that I got this data. Most of the world doesn't have adequate MS surveillance, and we don't have enough data from almost 75% of the world. But if you look at the rest of the world that has got data, you will find that the temperate climates have a much higher incidence and prevalence of MS as compared to the more tropical climates. The crude prevalence in India this is a study done from Bombay, was found to be 1.33 per 1 lakh population. So still not very high in India. Coming to the genetic factors in MS, the risk of getting MS is approximately 1 on 750 for the general population, 1 by 40 for those with a first degree relative with MS, 1 in 4 for an identical, for a person who has an identical twin with MS. 20% of people with MS have a blood relative with MS. So the risk is higher in any family where there are multiple people with MS. The symptoms of MS are very protean, which is why it becomes a little difficult to recognize the illness early enough, and sometimes there is a delay in the diagnosis. So the symptoms are very, very variable. It can start with fatigue and depression, can go to as severe as speech disturbance and bladder, bowel and sexual dysfunction. And in between you have all these changes. Memory change is something that again has been found to be an important symptom that's found more recently. Cognitive decline and memory disturbances and behavioral changes, which were initially not considered to be part of the MS spectrum. Increasingly now, neurologists and patients alike are realizing that cognitive decline is very much a part of multiple sclerosis and needs to be addressed. You can also have the more common ones like weakness, dizziness, numbness, unsteadiness, and vertigo. So the clinical spectrum of MS follows a very wide spectrum, and there are different clinical types of MS. This is important because the treatment varies in each of them. The most isolated form of MS is something called the clinical isolated syndrome. This is a single episode of MS-like symptoms based on the table that I showed you previously. Any of these symptoms occurring as a single isolated episode is called clinically isolated syndrome. This is important to recognize because in these patients it is essential to get an immediate MRI done, and if the MRI shows certain changes, it predicts whether the person is likely to develop full-blown MS subsequently or not. A person who has multiple MRI lesions with the clinically isolated syndrome is at a much higher risk of developing MS in the future and needs to be started on disease-modifying treatment early. This is the classical 4 patterns of MS that have been described from very early on when we came to know about MS. The most classical form is the relapsing remitting type. As you can see from this bar, what happens basically is the patient has a baseline, develops a neurological episode which occurs acutely, those symptoms last for a while. Then he or she comes back almost to the baseline, maybe with some residual deficit, and they keep getting episodes like this. On each occasion, the recovery is significant and they almost come back to baseline. Over a period of time, some amount of deficits tend to develop, which is shown in the second bar. The second variety is something that's very closely related to relapsing remitting type. It's called secondary progressive. It's sometimes very difficult to differentiate between these two. The pointer here is that probably in secondary progressive, the progression of symptoms is a lot more rapid than it is in relapsing remitting. In the sense that the person develops permanent disability a lot sooner than he or she would if they have relapsing remitting. The third is a variety that is probably most dreaded by us as physicians. It's called primary progressive, where the person has one episode of neurological symptoms and then there is a pretty rapid or progressive decline of the neurological status. The last one is a relatively uncommon one. Personally, I've never seen this variety. It's called progressive relapsing type, wherein you have a progressive course of neurological illness, which is in interval worsened by these episodes of worsening neurological symptoms that tend to come back. So if you look at the overall frequency of these types, relapsing remitting is by far the most common, accounts for more than half the cases. Secondary progressive accounts for 30%. These two together account for almost 80 to 90%. The remaining 10% is primary progressive and progressive relapsing. We don't have good treatment modalities for the primary progressive and the progressive relapsing type of MS. These two varieties, we have a lot of treatments. They will be discussed by subsequent speakers. There are certain negative prognostic indicators for MS that you as patients and we as physicians need to know. Any person who has frequent multifocal attacks, any person who has a heavy MRI burden on the initial scan, pyramidal involvement meaning primarily motor involvement and weakness, predominantly ataxia meaning problems in balance and problems in steadiness, cognitive difficulties occurring early on in the illness, memory disturbances or behavioral disturbances, a 5-year progressive accumulation of disability, and spinal progression, that is either progressive bladder involvement or progressive lower limb or upper limb involvement on both sides. These are all indicators that the person probably has a slightly severe form of disease and may not respond that well to treatment. In these persons, it's more important for us to educate and to initiate adequate rehabilitation measures early so that we can get a grip on the disease. There are certain misconceptions about MS that a lot of people have. I just highlighted a few of them. MS does not reduce life expectancy. MS does not always lead to severe disability. Most patients with MS are able to carry out a relatively normal life. There is a very small proportion of, there is a significant proportion, but not a very high proportion of patients that go into wheelchair or bed-bound status. So it's not, in that sense, kind of a death sentence. There is this misconception that women with MS cannot breastfeed and cannot get pregnant. On the contrary, a lot of immune-mediated diseases become suppressed during pregnancy, and if the person has been adequately controlled with medication, there is a possibility for a woman to get pregnant and even in certain occasions breastfeed. MS is not always hereditary. Like I showed in one of the previous slides, there are a lot of factors that play a role in MS. So hereditary is just one of the factors. MS can cause early cognitive decline, and the initial concept that MS is a pure white matter disease that is fast disappearing. There have been a lot of sophisticated MRI studies that have been done, which shows that there is a lot of gray matter involvement. Gray matter involvement means that the person is likely to develop behavioral problems, is likely to develop memory impairment. It's called cognitive impairment. Cognitive impairment is important to recognize in MS. It's very real and it needs to be addressed early, and patients and family members need to be educated about it. So that I'll conclude. This was just a very brief overview of what exactly happens in MS. I'm sure the subsequent speakers will be able to elaborate further on this. So I thank you all for this opportunity. Okay.
We'll have a question and answer session towards the end of all the talks, and I would like to thank Jayachandran personally because I told him only yesterday that you have to give a talk tomorrow. So that is what Jayachandran meant. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Jayachandran, for giving us an insight into MS. It was indeed very informative. Now I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Divakar. Dr. Divakar is a senior consultant radiologist at Vikram Hospital. He has vast experience in the field of neuroradiology. He will be educating us now about MRI in multiple sclerosis.
Hello, good morning everybody. Today I am going to speak on imaging in multiple sclerosis, how it is helpful in characterizing the lesion, and how it will be helpful in follow-up of the disease, how it will be helpful for neurologists to treat in multiple sclerosis. as Jaichandra has already told, it is a inflammatory disease or autoimmune disease which mainly affects the central nervous system, which involves brain, spine, and in one of the type it also involves the orbit. After MRI, it has revolutionized in the imaging system, where before only CT was there, where it cannot characterize the lesions. After MRI, we are almost able to detect 90% of the lesion in MRI, and some 5% of the diseases can be missed, where we have a new sequence called empty sequence, where it is able to detect what in the normal brain these lesions can be missed. Now, everyone will be thinking, what is MRI? MRI is just magnetic resonance imaging, where we will use magnetic field. Here there is no radiation as there is in X-ray or CT scan. So there is no harmful effect to the body. There is no radiation hazard to the body. So it can be used multiple times as it is needed in MS patients for follow-up scans. And why do I need to get an MRI? Because to characterize the lesion, basically because in clinical we'll see only the symptoms in the patient, how the lesion appears, how many lesions are there, and to see after the treatment whether it is responding to treatment or whether any new lesions are there, to see whether lesion is increasing or decreasing, and follow up and how the treatment should be modified. This basically depends upon the MRI, which helps neurologists to decide on the treatment. And so many will have doubt, how long does the MRI take? Why it takes so much, 15 minutes or 1 hour? Because MRI will take multiple sequences are there, because which characterize the lesion in different sequences. And one important is contrast, what we give, that is the type of dye we give in the IV contrast, which the new lesions or active lesions will take this contrast, which decides that these are new lesions and helps neurologists to modify the treatment. And what happens before MRI exam? I think most of you will be knowing this, who has undergone MRI, that who are having cardiac pacemaker or any bony implant in the body or ear implants are not allowed inside the MRI scan. As I said, why do I need to get an MRI in multiple sclerosis? Yeah.
All frequent you can take MRI scan.
No, first when the patient presents with symptoms with multiple sclerosis, we'll take basic scan to see how many lesions are there and to characterize the lesion. After that, the neurologist will give the treatment. After that, we'll see how the response is. If the patient worsens, if the symptoms worsen, then neurologist will advise for another MRI to compare with previous, whether the lesion is increasing or it is static or the lesions are decreasing. We'll compare with previous MRI, and it depends upon the symptoms and the neurology and how you respond to the treatment.
I think your question was how often you can do MRI,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So MRI is absolutely safe. You can do it continuously.
Continuous,
You
yeah.
can do the gantry continuously for 24 hours.
Even
Nothing like
in a month I can take
that. You can do daily MRI.
You can, yeah. There is no, as I said, there is no radiation hazard before only. So only I cleared before. You can take how many times if you want.
Okay,
So, yeah, because sometimes patient will present first with multiple sclerosis like weakness and all. After 1 week or 10 days, it might attack the orbit, where you have orbital pain and all. Then immediate after 1 week or 10 days, we might have to repeat MRI to see whether there is involvement of optic nerve. And why do I need to get an MRI? This is the best diagnostic tool to detect the lesions in the brain. As I said, 5% of the lesion can be missed even in MRI, in early part of the disease. But there is a sequence, this is called as empty sequence, where the early lesions can be picked up, even in normal brain. And to track the prognosis of the disease, that is, after treatment, how the disease is prognostic, whether the lesions are increasing or decreasing. And where are the lesions basically present in the brain? As you see, the red arrow indicates it is in the temporal region of the brain, and blue and yellow indicates it in periventricular and callosal area. These blue and yellow area are the classical sites where the multiple sclerosis lesions are involved. Yeah.
Would you suggest this MRI every year so that we can very much control the MS progression?
No, we can undergo each and every, but depends upon the symptoms. If there is no symptom, if the patient is static, I don't think it's really necessary. If any worsening is there, then we will see how the treatment is responding. Otherwise, if patient after treatment will take one scan, I think after 3 to 6 months, to see whether lesions are static or it has decreased in size. One basic MRI is necessary.
Towards the end of the program, we'll have a detailed question.
One basic MRI is necessary for that. Yeah. After that, depends upon neurologist will evaluate and he will refer for MRI. And as we see in MRI, all the lesions will appear bright. How do you differentiate whether it is a new lesion or it's an old lesion? So, as we have undergone so many, we will give IV contrast. You might be worrying, why we give IV contrast? What is the necessity of contrast? Because sometimes you will feel the prick and all, that pain. Why this contrast is necessary in MS? Because only new lesion, as Jayachandra has already told, this inflammation will occur adjacent to the blood vessel. There will be blood-brain barrier break in the brain, and there will be inflammation, and these new lesions, that means acute lesions, will take up the contrast. So we can differentiate between the new lesion and the old lesion. Otherwise, it's difficult to differentiate between new and old lesions in MRI. And another sequence is there, what is called as DWI, where this new lesion will appear bright. So these two sequences will differentiate new from old lesion. This is the MRI image where there is the DWI image where it appears bright, and this lesion is taking the contrast. This is the post-contrast, IV contrast. This lesion is taking the contrast. This other lesion appears bright, but these lesions are not taking contrast. Only this and this lesion is taking the contrast. These two indicates that these are new lesions in background of old lesion. These are similar examples. This appears bright on DWA where contrast is taken by the lesion. This is another DWA bright lesion which is taken by the contrast. And as you see how routine multiple sclerosis lesions appear. These will appear just bright on FLAIR and T2 sequence. There will be multiple sequences like in temporal lobe, as I told, brainstem, periventricular and callosum marginal areas, and we can't differentiate really which are new lesions and which are old lesions. Only if you put DWA sequence and if we give contrast, we will be able to differentiate in these lesions which are new and which are old. And these multiple lesions, why we will take different sequences? Why it takes so much time? We have to take different sequences, sagittal, coronal, axial. So characterize the lesion where actually it is present in the brain. And why do we need follow-up? Because we compare with previous MRI to see if any new lesions have appeared or there is any decrease in number of lesions when compared to previous MRI. This significance the treatment so which can be planned. So neurologist can plan the treatment, whether it's what the treatment has given, it's working, whether the lesion has decreased or it's not responding to the treatment as the lesion has increased in that. I will show you previous slides. This is the patient which after 6 months we have taken. This is the first MRI where these lesions are present in the brain cell, hyperintense lesion. After 6 months, these lesions have disappeared. This is responding to the treatment. It indicates this patient has responded to the treatment. And in this one, as you see, there is two new lesions. This lesion is there. Here two lesions are there. These two are present previously. But this one and this one, these two has appeared after 6 months. It indicates this is not responding to treatment or these two are new lesions or patient is progressive. As I said, these two are new lesions. Just I marked them. And this is the one patient where the disease was almost static. Almost 3 times we conducted the exam. This is the one lesion is static present. This another one was there. This almost disappearing, but this is still static. This is static. This one has gone. So disease is remained static. It has not progressed or improved much. And everyone will be asking why we have to cover brain, spine and orbit. Why orbit should be covered? Because all of you knowing most of the times it will involve brain and spine. And some of you might have experienced orbital pain also. Because there is one type of MS where the orbit will be involved. It is called as Devick's disease or neuromyelitis optica, where the optic nerve will be involved. So it's always better to evaluate orbit also when you are doing MRI scan, at least one basic scan. This is the where typically this is the two optic nerves where supplies the orbit for the vision. Here the right orbit nerve, it is swollen and appears bright. This is normal left where you can see surrounding CSF. This is where the spinal cord is also involved. So spinal cord has to be screened. Next. And this is where the brain is also involved. So MS can involve brain, spine and orbit. All the three structures can be involved. Here's another example where this right orbit nerve appears very bright, and after giving contrast, you can see this nerve is enhancing on the contrast and this nerve is not enhancing. So it indicates there is inflammation in right optic nerve and involvement of optic nerve. Here's another example where spine is involved, right optic nerve is swollen and it's taking the contrast. Here it's not taking the contrast. So all the three structures are involved. And all will be worrying why so many sequences are required. We can cover only in flare and finish off the study. But we have to differentiate. MS is not a simple job, just we see the legend and characterize. Only MS is there. We have to differentiate between so many diseases which mimics MS. So this is T2 sequence where you can't actually appreciate where the lesion is. All appears bright. Where is the lesion? So we will suppress the water within the ventricle, so lesion appears bright. But we can't put only this sequence because here there will be some artifacts. And these are some criteria which is there. I don't think not much necessary. This thing which already Jaychandra has explained. These are the subtle subtypes. Neuromyelitis optica which I told. This is concentric sclerosis where it will be helpful for neurologists that some severe type for treatment. These two types. And this is the one severe type, concentric type, where there is alternating demyelination and remyelination, where there is alternate enhancement. And this type of pattern, if we image on MRI, it's not routine multiple sclerosis, little bit severe type, so it will be helpful for neurologists to give the treatment. And what are the differential diagnoses? With some close mimics of multiple sclerosis, while we see MRI is vasculitis and